Hello, welcome. Let's talk about peri-workout nutrition, which is all of the nutrition encompassing the training window. So that's before, that's during in some cases, and after training as well. Let's get into it. I'm going to break this down into those three phases. Depending on where you are in your fitness journey, I recommend that if you're more beginner, just take away mainly around meal structure and meal timing. If you are more advanced and you want to optimize, or you're also a beginner and want to optimize, then focus also on the macro recommendations as well, and also more specific food choices, which will help you out as well. Okay, so let's get into it and take what you need, okay, based on your situation. So what is the purpose of our peri-workout nutrition? It is to provide enough fuel for our training sessions and for our recovery, okay? Now, when we think about what are we trying to do? We're trying to get stronger, we're trying to get faster, we're trying to get bigger. All of this is contingent on our ability to perform, and our ability to perform is going to depend on the fuel that we have to do that. So really the nutrition around your training period is going to be one of the most important parts of nutrition. Let's talk more specifically about the fuel process itself. When we are training, we are pulling from different fuel sources such as stored muscle glycogen. So think about the carbohydrates that we eat and they're stored in our body, stored in our muscles, stored in our liver, and also circulating around our bloodstream, so circulating glucose or sugars. We can also pull from fat sources in our body, whether that's body fat or whether that's also circulating fatty acids, or even to some degree fatty acids in our muscles. So there are different types of fuel sources, and being in a position where we are adequately supplied is going to be important for performing at our best, quite simply. Okay, let's start with pre-training nutrition. Now, coming into a session, we want to make sure that we have that energy availability. We want to make sure that we have enough hydration, and also electrolytes, so water and electrolytes. Electrolytes being sodium, potassium, magnesium, which are the main ones that would help you out the most. Provide an anabolic window, so we know the importance of protein. Protein is going to help promote an environment that helps muscle growth, right? Because our body is in this constant state of muscle breakdown and muscle growth, and we want to tip the scale towards muscle growth, of course. And having protein around the training window can help with that. We want to minimize hunger, right? Nothing worse than getting into a training session and you are hungry and distracted by the grumbling in your stomach. We want to avoid that. And of course, with all of our peri-workout nutrition, we want to ideally avoid anything that causes discomfort. So irritated stomach, bloating, excess fullness. And depending on what type of training that you are doing, whether you are lifting weights or versus you're doing more something cardio intensive, will determine your energy needs. If you are lifting weights, of course you want to be adequately supplied with, carbohydrate and energy, but even more so if you are doing something more intensive like running, you're doing intervals, you're doing a long run, because naturally cardio-based activities, moderate intensity and above, are going to be more carbohydrate demanding compared to, say, an hour of lifting. Because really an hour of lifting is your sets last maybe 40 seconds to 90 seconds, even less if you're doing lower reps. And you're also resting a fair bit. You're resting 3 minutes, 4 minutes in between your sets. So really an hour of strength training is less than half of that of actual work. Makes sense? It's not the same for cardio. It's normally ongoing, or the intervals are a lot shorter. So keep that in mind. We want to match our energy intake to the demands of our actual training style. Okay? Let's talk about pre-training. I mentioned that we want carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are our main fuel source. So we want, ideally, fast digesting carbohydrates that are going to be ready and past digestion, ready in the bloodstream, ready to be used. We want protein in some cases if we are eating further away from training. So let's say we're having our pre-training meal an hour to 90 minutes before training, even 2 hours before training, then you can have a more wholesome, fuller meal. And that could include protein as well, right? Lean cuts of meat, chicken, beef, so forth. With your fiber and fat, this will depend on how close your meal is to your training session. Quite simply, easy heuristic here, meals closer to the workout should digest faster, which means you want less fat and fiber because those two slow down digestion. Meals that are further from the workout should digest slower because you want to be able to time it right. So you can add more fat and more fiber. So timing does play a role here in terms of what your meal might look like. If you are literally on the way to the gym, you might just have a piece of fruit, some dried fruit, some honey, maple syrup, some dried apricots you have in your car, because you need that to be quickly digested and popped into your bloodstream so that your muscles can use it, right? You wouldn't have a big bowl of chicken, potatoes, and broccoli half an hour before your gym session, because that's just going to sit in your stomach. And part of your pre-training nutrition is, it's not just about eating food, it's about having food that is digested, has drip fed into your small intestine, passed through your intestinal wall and into your bloodstream, and ready to use, okay? So, examples of actual pre-training foods. Let's say you're training in the next hour. You get 2 rice cakes, honey and jam, maple, some peanut butter, or any form of nut butter, banana, honey, nut butter, a bagel with a spread of, again, jams, peanut butter, a cereal bar with some nuts. You've got your carbohydrates, you've got a source of fats. I do recommend that you add a source of fruit in there, because combining glucose and fructose is a potent combination to enhance your fueling, okay? Other examples, as I mentioned before, if you're closer to session, have some dried fruit, pop that in. Or let's say that you had your last full meal 2 hours ago, just top up with some dried fruit, some that's gonna just elevate your blood sugar, get you ready to train. If you are training, 90 minutes, 60 minutes away, 90 minutes away, even 2 hours away, you can have a bit of a fuller meal. So you can have a more conventional whole food meal with a cut of meat, grains, potatoes, and a serve of vegetables, and a healthy serve of fats as well. That's essentially a mixed meal, and that'll support you plenty for your session in an hour or two. I've got examples here of, say, a 75 kilogram male training 30 minutes, a 60 kilogram female training in 2 hours, of what that could look like as a meal, okay? So keep this in mind. When is your pre-training meal? How close is it to training? What type of training are you doing? So how intensive is it? These answers to these questions will help you determine what you want to have. In terms of specific foods, this is a great place to start. Don't be afraid, I will add, don't be afraid of having foods that are more processed pre-training. So something like a cereal bar, I wouldn't normally advise that you have that, because it's not going to leave you full, right? It's low protein. But if you need to have it now and you need to have that carbohydrate soon, it makes sense to have it, okay? This is why we don't simply think about foods as good foods, bad foods, because again, it's going to range in nutritional quality. Food is going to range in nutritional quality, but there's a time and place for many of those foods that you might consider nutritionally not as rich, right? Okay, or more processed. Keep in mind, a pre-training meal that you have is not going to make up for poor eating in the days prior. So if you have gone the last 2-3 days skipping meals, you haven't eaten enough food, you haven't been eating enough carbohydrate, your total calories are lower or like really inconsistent, you're not going to be able to save that with just a pre-training meal and going to the gym. Because at the end of the day, your body, think of your body like a sponge, and your body is ideally topped up with stored glycogen, right? Your muscles and your liver can store glycogen like a fuel tank or a sponge. And you want to stay topped up so that you can train and you've got access to all of that when you need it. If you are not fully replenished, you're entering that training session with an incomplete tank. And depending on the level of intensity that you're training with, will affect how much that impacts you. So keep that in mind. It said differently, yesterday's meals matter more than today's meals. Okay? Intra-workout nutrition. So intra-workout nutrition is any form of nutrition that you're getting within the training session. So if you are thinking about, say, someone who's running a long distance after, that's beyond 60 minutes, you might start to have a gel. That's a form of intra-workout nutrition. But the same can also be said for someone who's doing an intense lifting session that maybe lasts more than an hour. You might also top up and have some, maybe some form of carbohydrate in the form of, say, some sugars in your gym shaker, right? Or your water bottle. Something that you can take in quickly and supply the rest of your session. Intra-workout training nutrition is more relevant for someone who is training for longer than 60 minutes. If you are training fasted, so let's say that you've just woken up and you train in the early morning, you're not going to have time to eat. So it could make more sense to either top up with some dried fruit and maybe sip on some sugars throughout your training session. And that's going to be a form of your pre-workout, right? Or your intro workout. So you have something in your body. If you're in a very deep calorie deficit and very lean, where your carbohydrates are limited, then you want to be more careful about when you are having the carbohydrates. Ideally, when you need it, which is around the training window. It's also going to help you preserve muscle. If you're an advanced trainee and looking to optimize everything out of your training and your performance, then it can also make sense to have some intra-workout nutrition. My recommendations are foods or drinks that are going to give you immediate sugars. So think about powdered sugar like dextrose monohydrate in your shaker. Okay, you can sip on that throughout. Gummy lollies, very easy. Jelly beans, jelly snakes, right? Easy carbohydrate. Carb and electrolyte mixes can help. And in terms of how much carbohydrate you should be having, a good guide is about 0.5 gram of carbs per minute of training beyond 30 minutes onwards. Okay, but I recommend play around with this based on your own duration of your own session. There is going to be individual variance here in terms of what fits well with your gut, in terms of what keeps your energy high, and so forth. But ideally, you want something that's high glycemic load, something that spikes your insulin and raises your blood sugar very quickly. Okay, anything slower than that, like if you pop, say, some sourdough toast in the middle of your session, that's going to sit in your stomach and it's not actually going to get the benefits of it until it's fully digested and assimilated. So don't do that. And post-training, again, the goal of post-training nutrition is to kickstart that process of muscle recovery and reparation and growth. Promote muscle glycogen replenishment, right? So when we train, we are depleting our muscle glycogen. We want to be able to replenish that and restore any lost hydration and electrolytes. Now, there is this idea in early bodybuilding that there's an anabolic window, which is that window after training where you have to get your protein in, your carbohydrates in to get the benefits of your training session, right? So you think about the person who just finishes their set. As soon as they walk out the gym, they're sipping on their protein shake. Now, the urgency to get your nutrition in after lifting is not like that. It's a bit of an exaggeration. But there is a slither of truth, and that is ideally you have your post-workout nutrition within the hour after your session is a good guide. It's not binary. It doesn't mean that after that you don't get the benefits and like you've missed out on the anabolic gains, the muscle gains. It just means that like a gradient, you want to be getting it in relatively sooner. That way you're not leaving your body in an unfed state. In other words, your body is starved of carbohydrates, again, depending on how intense your training is. And ideally you want to refeed that sooner, right? We want to replenish our muscle sooner because that is going to help with muscle growth and recovery. And there is a period after your training session where there's inherently more muscle damage, where you're more depleted. It makes sense to feed it more there, okay? So you want to have a good wholesome meal. Have protein, have carbohydrate, and have some fats and fiber, okay? I wouldn't be doing a high fat, high fiber meal because back to my pre-training meal, for example, you don't want to have foods that like slow down digestion massively. So don't have something super fatty and super high fiber, no carbs, and this is not going to be the best for replenishing your muscle glycogen. So ideally you have a lean cut of protein, some carbohydrate, add some fruit in there, again, glucose, fructose, great combination. Have some fats, have some fiber, okay? An example of what that could look like is a nice wholesome meal like this. Okay, if you are someone who is training, looking to optimize, then there is an argument to be made that you can have a very low fat, low fiber meal and your post-training will look very similar to your pre-training. It's about getting the carbohydrates in because your muscles after training are very insulin sensitive, meaning that they're going to soak up the carbohydrates that you give it very well. They're sensitive to that carbohydrate. It makes more sense to get that carbohydrate in your system and deliver to the muscle cell, and having options that essentially allow that to happen very quickly is a good choice. So your post-training meal can look very similar to your pre-training meal if you're looking to absolutely optimize and you have more calories to do that with, okay? So in summary, your peri-workout nutrition or nutrition pre, during in some cases, and after is going to be very important to get the most out of your performance. Whether you are lifting or running or the level of intensity that you bring to your session, the level of the duration is going to affect your energy needs. I recommend, regardless of what you do, that you be observant of how your nutrition around your training affects your performance. If you're feeling flat and lethargic, ask yourself, have you had enough carbs? Is that food fully digested? So is the timing right? Is the composition right? And this can be a process of trial and error, okay? Lastly, I will talk quickly about maybe just a bit more on the running. For those of you who are doing more running and cardio intensive work, I've got some notes here. Forgive the typos here. This is just me with my notes based on research, okay? So if you're training for over 90 minutes, right, it's a long run, even if it's an easy run, but it's a long run, that is very glycolytic, meaning it requires a lot of carbohydrate. So you can consume 30 to 50 grams pre-run, 20 to 30 grams of carbs per hour, okay? This is where you can use things like those gels. I do recommend, if you're going to be using gels, just make sure you're conditioning yourself to do that because there is the condition of, or the factor of your gut tolerance, right? Because like I said in the beginning, you don't want your gut to be irritated pre, during, or post training. But at the same time, you want to get carbs in. So some of those gels can be a bit more impactful on your gut, which is where you have to train yourself to do this, okay? If it's a short, easy run, you'll be fine, right? With a mixed meal 2 hours before. If you're doing speed and tempo work, even if it's a shorter session, that's very like glycolytic demanding. You're burning through carbohydrate. So make sure you're getting enough. You might have to top up right before training, or even an intra workout drink would be great for that. And even if you're doing a long run, as I mentioned, even if it's slow, here are some guides as well. I mentioned here 20, 30 grams per hour. This could even be more. Like in research, I believe 60 to 120 grams per hour on the higher end is also tolerated and helpful for performance, provided you've trained your gut to do that. Okay? So, hope that makes sense. And let me know how you go. Any follow-up questions, drop them to me, and I'll get back to you with specific recommendations for your situation.